Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm super excited about today's conversation. Today, I have with us author Jim Lafter, and he is going to talk with us today about some of his ideas with writing and share some insight with all of you that is coming from a different perspective than my own. And I know that that's going to be valuable to you. Before we get started, I wanted to pull up his author page and let you see that he actually is an author and he knows what he's talking about. And he is someone that you can trust to bring you good information. So I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to jump right over here to we have to get off of this page, of course, but we're going to go right here. This is Jim's personal website. And so you can read about him here. You can see a listing of his books. So they are down in this area. And there's an about section too. And Jim is a very fascinating man, as you can see, if you want to read through there. I've been chit-chatting with him before the recording for just a few minutes, and I am fascinated to know more. I just found out that there's a story behind his last name, and so I'm excited to find out more about that. So there's just information here where you can read more about Jim on that site, but then also here is his Amazon page. And so you can look at the books here, get yourself a copy of one of his books, and get yourself caught up on the young adult fiction that he writes. So if young adult is something that you are very fascinated in, this would be a great place for you to get some new reading material. So you could look for Jim in this space. And so I'm going to now take us back to oh my goodness, stop share. It's been a few days since I used that feature and I was like, how do I get out of that? I forgot.
Well, I'm amazed that you actually found that website. I thought I closed that website. I'm trying to work on something else. I didn't know that website was still up. It still got some personal information and stuff like that on. But there is one thing I disagree with. You said visit the site and get one of his books. There's more than one. You can get all you want. I'm not hard to get along with.
Yeah, get all of them. Get all of them.
That's what you're looking for.
Right.
Okay. But I write in several genres.
All right. So you guys, this is Jim, and I'm super excited that he's here today. I have not actually met Jim in person, so this is new for me too. And I'm excited to ask him some questions and get us all some information here. So to get us started, Jim, why don't you give us a little bit of information about why you started writing in the first place? What about writing draws you?
Well, actually, my writing started many years ago when I was in the service. I did technical writing. I used to write reports, do technical writing, and I worked. I was a trainer, and so I had to write tests and all that other stuff, and that kind of got me interested in it. And then after I retired from the service, I had a very good friend of mine who was a minister. He was a real good storyteller, but he couldn't write worth a flip. I mean, he didn't know the difference between a comma and a period. He just was, he could tell a story,
right?
But he couldn't write it down. And so he called me one day and he said, Jim, he says, I've written a story that I think is pretty good, but I'm not real sure about it. I said, well, send it to me. Let me take a look at it. And so he did, and I read through it and the best I could, and it had good bones. You know how you can read a story and it's just got good bones, but the skeleton wasn't very strong, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
And so I called him back and I said, listen, said you've got a good story here. I said, but it really needs a lot of work. He said, what should we do? And I said, well, give me a month. Give me a month or 6 weeks and let me go through it and see what I can do. So I went through and I added color and character and all, you know how you do, background, and we put together just a pretty decent story. And over time, we decided that we would develop it into a series, and that's what we did. And now, of course, he is no longer with us. And so I own it now. And I think I've created, there's either 7 or 8 books. I've lost count of that series that are in it. And but it's a young adult series. One thing that we decided on it is we wanted to keep it clean.
Mhm.
There's no profanity in it. There's no sex scenes in it. There's none of that in it. There's some violence in it because it's in outer space. You know, there's people in outer space are always killing each other.
Right, right.
But after we'd finished the first manuscript, and that was in 1997, then we went into the process of trying to find a publisher,
Mhm.
and which is, if you don't know what you're doing, it's really a hard process to take. So I bought Jeff Herman's book of publishers and agents and stuff like that, and I wrote letters to, I think, probably everybody I could find an address for. I didn't have a clue on how to do it. And I got back rejection letters. You're not what we're looking for. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And then one day I was at a ball game over here at the Driller Stadium, and I was sitting there minding my own business, watching the ball game, and I heard a conversation behind me because I'm a notorious eavesdropper. And I heard a conversation behind me by these two fellows that was talking, and one of them says, "Well, how's the book going?" And he said, "Well, the book isn't bad, but the author is almost impossible to work with." And so the other guy got up to go do what you do at a ball game. He went to get a drink, I think. I don't see anything else. But he left the stands, and I turned around to the other fellow and I said, "I heard you talking about a book." And he said, "Yeah." I said, "But he said," and I said, and you said something about the author." And he said, "Yeah, he's hard to work with." And I said, "Well, I'm an author. I wrote a book." And he said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah." So we got to talking, just talking back and forth, and come to find out he was an agent for a publisher.
Oh, wow.
And he gave me the information to the publisher and said, "It sounds like what you're doing is interesting," because I told him about the series. He says, and he gave me the name of the publisher, and he says, "Give this guy a call and tell him that I sent you."
Oh, wow.
And that's how it all started. And so we got our first contract within a few months, and just it's just gone from there. And we've gone from a couple. I've left that publisher and went to another, and so forth and so on. And that's how it started. And it was just, sometimes you're in the right place at the right time.
Right.
You know, sometimes you fall off the bench. Okay, but other than that, you're all right.
Right, absolutely. But and you have to put yourself out there too, and you
Yeah,
have to take chances and
can't
collect
be
the
shy.
rejection slips.
Yeah, you can't be shy. You can't be shy.
No, you cannot be shy. You just keep going and you keep going and you keep going, and eventually it comes around.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Oh, I love your story. I love that you were just at a ball game.
Just at a ball game, and I don't think I've been back to one or two since then.
Well, it was the right place at the right time, and that's
Yeah.
super fantastic. I love that. Yeah, I ended up going to a writing group in St. Louis. Just looked for a group that I could join, and because I was missing, I have a master's of fine arts in writing, and I was missing the peer review process, and I was missing just having that camaraderie between myself and other writers. And I joined it, and turns out that one of them was a small publisher.
Yeah.
And so she was like, "Give me your work." And I was like, "Yay!"
Let me see it. I mean, I tell authors all the time, you know, a lot of people ask me, you know, "Could you look at my work?" And I do. And some of it is really good, and some of it you just have to tell them it needs a lot of work,
Yes.
you know.
Yes,
And if
absolutely.
somebody tells me it needs a lot of work, I go back and I do a lot of work on it.
Right. And you don't take it personally either. You cannot.
You can't take it personally.
No, that's something I tell the students is it's a separate entity from you. Once you have finished a work, it's not a part of you. It is its own being, its own
Yeah.
entity. So you can't take any of it personally.
Yeah.
Just can't. It is what it is. And if they say fix it, you say okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. All right. So let's talk about your writing process, Jim. What
Okay.
do you do?
Well, it depends on the work that I'm doing. It depends on the genre that I'm working in, because I work in several different genres. The first, I started out with sci-fi, Well, I started out with the military with the technical writing, and if you want to be bored, you want to be bored stiff. I've got some technical books over on my shelf that I wrote 30, maybe 35 years ago, and you talk about boring. They will bore you to sleep. I was going through one of them the other day, and I thought, I cannot believe it. I wrote this stupid stuff. I mean, but I wrote it for the military, so they didn't know any difference. But
Right.
then I then I launched off into sci-fi, and our first book was Escape to Destiny,
Okay.
and it is the first book of the sci-fi series. And then what we did with it is we outlined, and that's when I was working with my former partner. What we did is we outlined the series. We knew where we wanted to start, and that was with a 16-year-old boy on a planet called Urdinata who had to escape the abuse of an abusive brother. That was the escape. And so he escaped on a spaceship and goes off on his adventure. And so we knew we were going to follow him through his lifetime and follow him in his career, but also that we couldn't just follow one character. And so we outlined other books in the series that were all on the same timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And so while one thing is happening, something else is happening, or else it follows real close and interweaves. And people say that I do a lot of mesh.
Yes.
So we kind of mesh them together. And so all of the books in that series so far are on the same basic concept, but don't all necessarily follow that same character.
Mm-hmm.
The first character is not in every book.
Okay.
So it goes that way. And so we had to outline, and we did.
Mm-hmm.
We outlined 16 books. Of those 16 books, I think I have since he's gone now. I think I've finished 8 of them.
Wow.
The rest of them we still have an outline, and a couple of them we actually did the manuscript on, but they're not perfect and they're not ready to go. Eventually, I'm 69 years old. That series may not make it. One of your students may have to come along and pick up the flag and run with it, because this old man may be gone. And then a few years ago, I got a call from a lady that, have you ever heard of Stephen Stainer? You know who Stephen Stainer is?
No.
Stephen Stainer was a 7-year-old boy in Merced, California. This was back in oh gosh, I'd have to look it up. 72, I think it was 1972. He was kidnapped while walking home from school. He was picked up by a pedophile.
Oh.
Held captive for 7 years, terribly abused over the period of time. And then after 7 years, the pedophile, his name was Kenneth Parnell, he decided he would kill Stephen and kidnap another child, do the same thing to him. Well, on the day that he had planned to kill Stephen escaped and took the second boy with him.
Oh,
and returned him through great peril to himself back to his family. Mm-hmm. And so the book, I think I've got a copy of it here, is From Victim to Hero.
Okay.
And it tells the story of Stephen Stainer. Now, just to be sure to let you know that when I wrote this book and when I coordinated this with the family, Stephen's family, that we agreed that we would not go into the sexual abuse aspect of it.
Right.
And so there are other books on the market that talk about that. I don't like that stuff. And so although in my book, that is happening,
right,
what I had to do is I had to get into Stephen's spirit, and he's no longer with us. He's dead. And so I had to introduce myself to him through people who knew him.
Right.
So
wow.
in the book, even though there are conversations in the book, they're conversations that were relayed to me by people who had those conversations. I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
And so when you read the book, you actually can, you see what Stephen saw,
Right.
but you see it through the eyes of other people. That was a different process. When I wrote this book, they provided me from the Merced Police Department and other sources. They provided me all of the police reports and all the photographs, and I got all the cassette tapes that they recorded, all the conversations, all of that they gave to me. And then I took all of that information. It was a big stack, a big box of information. I took all that information and I wrote an outline of 100,000 words. I was going to write 25,000 word chapters and an 8,000 word appendix.
Right.
And so it's 108,000 words. But in this process, I wrote it exactly the way I outlined it. There are, in writing, it never goes by the outline. It always goes something gets out of whack and gets out of line. And sometimes I've written characters off of a page and couldn't find them. You know what I'm talking about?
Right, I do.
You ever done that? And so that's my true crime story.
Wow.
I don't know if you want to know about my stuff or not. I know this is the process, but a lot of my writing is just seat of the pants. I've got a series of books that I write called the Keller Williams Murder Mystery, a thriller series. This is called The Apostle Murders, and this is the story of a Christian evangelist he's a retired pastor who hears from God, and he believes that God has told him to reestablish the modern day church by recreating the martyrdom of the original apostles.
Oh.
So while he's preaching the gospel on the weekend, he's a serial killer during the week. I based that on my own father.
Oh.
And so now my father was not a serial killer, but when you read the description of the serial killer in this book, it's an exact description of my own dad.
That's amazing.
And
I love that.
So when I would write about him, that's who I saw. I saw the way my father walked. I saw the way he stooped at the shoulder. My father had been shot as a young man in his right arm, and his right arm curled and created a hook. The character has that hook. And so I was able to get into this character's head because I knew my father very well.
So, but what made you want to write that story?
I have no idea. I was just, I do have an idea. I was traveling and I was at a rest stop over on the east side of Oklahoma, just near the Arkansas border. And there was in the parking lot, there was a motorhome, and there was an old man there. And then over at a picnic table, there was a young man who had just gotten a sandwich or something out of a vending machine. He's braver than I am, I can tell you that. But he got he got a sandwich, and I watched him sit there and eat that, and then I watched the old man watching him. And I thought, that kid could disappear and nobody would ever know. And so I formulated the idea that, and that's what I came up with. I thought, what if this old man picks up this kid and murders him along the highway? What it happens all the time.
Right.
And so I just started working on it, and I didn't outline it. I had no idea where I was going. I just wrote it chapter by chapter, and I knew where I wanted it to go, but I had no idea how I was going to get there.
Wow.
And it worked. It worked because I have a long church history. And so I just kind of blended what I know about. I worked with missionaries for 13 years overseas. And so I kind of know the way the ministry thinks.
Right.
And I know a little bit about church history, and I'm not near as dumb as I look. And so I just kind of blended it all together. And then I formed it in the main character, one of the main characters in it, I based that on myself. And so when you read him, you've seen me.
I love that. And that's why I tell the students is you have to pour yourself out into your stories. There's so much vulnerability when you are truly writing something that's going to be beautiful and effective, you've got to
Yeah.
pour yourself out.
And something that I tell writers all the time, because a lot of people ask, how do you write this, or what's your process? We're talking about processing and editing and publishing and stuff like this, but I'll just tell you, students, and I hope I don't go against your philosophy, but it's not important how you write. What's important is why you write.
Oh, yeah.
So the why is more important than the how. Let the students know that Miss Cunningham, right,
Yes.
can teach you how to write. You can learn verbs and pronouns and adverbs. I hate adverbs. But you can learn all the sentence structures. You can learn syntax.
Thank you for saying that, because I tell them adverbs are bad.
I hate adverbs.
Bad.
But you can learn how to write.
Yes.
But unless you know why you're
Yes.
writing, it's not going to do any good to put it on paper. I'm going to tell you something that I tell people all the time, especially people at the Tulsa Night Riders, is this. In a book, no matter what book it is, this is one of my books. I've got John Maxwell books. I've got a library over here that'll shake your teeth. The least important thing in a book are the words. The least important thing in a book are the words. If you are writing, unless the words you write stir an emotion, you might as well not even write them.
Yes.
Because it has to stir an emotion. Now, some of the stuff that I write will make you mad. That's an emotion. Some of the things that I write will make you cry.
Right.
When I get my royalty checks, that's what I do. Okay, but words will stir an emotion. And so knowing why you're writing is more important than the how. The how can be corrected. The why's got to come from the inside.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Completely. Why are you writing? What does this do for you? It's a passion. It's
a passion.
It's something that you have to do. You just have to do it.
Yeah, and when you're working on a project, I'm going to tell you right now, you can forget sleep. Yes. Your diet is going to go clean out the window, because what'll happen is you'll be laying in bed. Now, this is me. I'll be laying in bed and I'll get a thought in my mind, and it's always 2:30 in the morning. I don't know why in the world I cannot get an idea at 6 o'clock in the morning when I'm already up. But at 2:30 in the morning,
right,
an idea will hit me, and I'll say, "Oh, for crying out loud, let me get out of bed." And I'll come down here to the office and got a yellow pad, and I'll scratch it out. I can't read my own cotton picking handwriting, so I scratch it. And then I have to go back and say, what the heck? What does that word?
Right.
But I know the idea.
Right.
And so when I put it in my computer, it may not be the same thing as what I scratched on the pad, but it's the idea of the idea.
Absolutely. That's what I tell the students sometimes, that the characters talk to me. Like,
oh yeah.
They and I have full-on conversations, and I don't know how to explain that to someone who isn't passionate about writing.
Yeah.
They're my friends.
Yeah, I've got a couple of stories on Kindle. They're short stories. And because what I'm doing is I'm working on a Western book, but I'm writing it in 7 short stories.
Okay.
But I intend to combine it into one book. And it's the story of an old cowboy. His name is Runt, R-U-N-T, Runt. And he's a little guy. He's about 5 feet tall. he's a little short guy, but he's a full cowboy. And so what I'm doing is I'm telling his story from his point of view, telling his story to somebody. He's old now, and he's telling his story. And so when I got to writing it, I thought, well, how do people speak in the 1870s, 1880s? What was their vernacular? So I decided that I would write this book, these stories, in first person 19th century Western vernacular.
Wow.
And so all the verbiage is wrong. I mean, it's all wrong. If you can imagine talking to Festus Hagen off of Gunsmoke, okay, that's kind of like what this guy is. And so I submitted it after I finished the first story. I submitted it to an analyst who goes through and tells you, this is right, this is wrong, so forth and so on. And when he sent me back the analysis, actually, he spoke to me on the phone about it. And he said, I finished the analysis on the story, and the story is called My First Cattle Drive. And I said, okay, what about it? And he says, well, Jim, I'm just going to tell you the truth about it. He says, everything in the story is wrong. I said, what? He said, everything is wrong. He says, your vernacular is wrong. He says, it's just wrong. And I said, well, what can I do about it? He says, leave it exactly like it is because it's absolutely perfect. And so, it's published. That one is called My First Cattle Drive, and then the second one is called I forget, Prospecting for Gold. And so I'm following this old cowboy through his life.
Wow.
And so that you can see what it was like to live in the Old West. I even go to a body house. Oh, yeah.
It's hilarious. Oh my gosh, I love it. That's awesome. Yeah, do you have to like take yourself and fully put yourself into those places where those characters live?
With the Westerns, I actually did a lot of research trying to get the feel of the Old West. I am not a cowboy, as you can tell, but this guy spends a lot of time on horseback. The only time I've ever been on a horse was when I was like 10 years old. My dad bought a Shetland pony. And he took me and he said, my mama says, what are you doing? He said, this boy's going to ride this pony. And so he didn't buy a saddle, he didn't buy a bridle, he didn't buy a blanket, he didn't buy anything. He picked me up, set me on the back of that pony and said, okay, here's what you do. My dad was not a cowboy either. He said, take your two hands and grab a hold of that mane and then kick this pony in the ribs and the pony will do the work. Yeah, that's the same way he taught me how to swim. He threw me in the lake, said, now kick your feet. But in any case, and so I grabbed hold of it. He did the same thing on a bicycle. He put me on top of the hill. In any case, so this was my dad, the serial killer. And so I grabbed hold of that mane, I kicked that pony in the ribs, and the pony did the work. And about 100 yards down the street, I hit the ground. And Daddy went and got that pony, and he says, okay, little sister, Janice, my little sister, he says, it's your turn. And so
that's fantastic.
It's like riding. You learn by experience. Sometimes you get thrown on the ground.
That's true.
Sometimes you get your breath knocked out of you.
That's absolutely right. I have a book that I have not, it's a manuscript at this point. I haven't finished it yet. It's probably about 3/4 of the way done, but it's just not something that I can do right now. I just do not have the heart to finish that story, but I had to do some intense research because there was a car accident. Well, it was more than a car accident. It was a crash. It was a NASCAR situation where this driver has this awful crash happen while he's in a race. And I've never even been to a race. I've never been to a NASCAR race of any kind. And so I researched and I read and I watched video after video after video. And then I found one that I really thought was the one I wanted to use. And I watched it multiple times so I could begin to really put myself into that situation and really find my emotions in that story. And it became something that was so hard for me because it was so emotional, because I had done so much research in it that I cried through the whole time of the actual writing process when it began, because I had done so much research and really found there was so much involved in that accident, even though it was so short. It happened so fast. Yeah. There's so much involved in that process in order to create it in a way that someone could read it and find it was this emotional experience, and I would love to finish the story. I'm not there. But
are you having trouble transferring those emotions to the page?
no, not in that one. That
No?
scene is way done. It's just, I'm much further into the story, but then I had some situations in my own personal life where they stopped that story.
So what point of view are you writing that story from?
It is from the wife's perspective. This is her husband who he dies in the accident. And
What she feels about every time he gets in the race car and every time he puts on that flame-proof suit.
terrified.
Yeah,
Absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
And then she's there when it happens, and it's horrible. Like, it is a horrible accident that I was able to write, but I've never been able to. I went a little bit story with the story, but I've never been able to finish it because it was so difficult. Does that make sense? I have not been able to, I guess, maybe almost put myself back into the situation to really take that in a harder experience for myself. Well,
maybe what you might want to do is step away from it and look at it from a different point of view and see if you can tie them together.
Right.
That might work. It might not.
Well, for me, it became a situation where my former husband, I wrote it when I was married with him, or married to him, and I found myself liking the fact that he died, and wouldn't it be great if him died, and it was something I had to. But
that sounds like my wife. When I retired, my wife told me, if you don't get a job, I'm going to suffocate you with a pillow. So
yeah. And so I said I don't feel like I did a great I didn't do. I'm having a hard time putting that into words. Apparently, you can tell it's emotional for me.
Yeah.
I have a hard time just pulling that manuscript back up and starting to write it again, because I'm not married to that person anymore, and I still would like for something like that.
You're probably going to have to go back. You're probably going to have to go back to the start of it and maybe tweak it a little bit to where you take some of the old Darcy out of it.
It is because it's horrible what happens to this guy. It is horrible.
Yeah.
But it was because I did so much research and was able to do a lot of reading people's reactions to these situations. And then I found the story that I wanted to, or the actual situation that I wanted to put in the story. And it's one I just can't because it's so harsh for me. I haven't been able to go back to it, but I have other stories, but it's, and Stephen King says in on writing or in his book, he says, there was under the, what book was that? Under the Dome?
Oh, The Dome?
Yeah, he started it 20 years before he ever wrote it.
Really? Wow.
He said, I was not ready.
I'm too old to do that. I just had a birthday. The next one was going to be a biggie. Okay.
Well, I kind of feel like that perhaps that situation that I wrote about, that actual accident, might be something that I end up taking it and then putting it into another manuscript. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I think that the situation with that particular marriage and that particular situation, I think that's just
and a lot of that, what you're talking about right there, could fall under the heading of editing, because when you're working on your book, or sometimes an editor will say, we need to take this paragraph and move it over here, or as some have said to me, we need to take this paragraph out and throw it away over there.
Yes, I think that probably is exactly what that particular manuscript needs. It needs somebody else to read it, which I haven't shared it with anyone.
Yeah.
So it's just something that it's too much for me. It's too emotional for me, I think.
Yeah,
And
don't show it to your mother,
no,
because she'll love it and won't give you any true feedback.
oh,
No, I never show. Now my wife is the only person that reads any of my manuscripts before anybody sees it, because my wife, I've been married to her for 50 years, and I'm going to tell you right now, if it stinks, she's going to let me know it stinks. She's never said a kind word to me when it comes to writing if it's bad. Now, if it's
I
good, she'll
think
say,
that's
"Oh, I like
wonderful.
this."
That's wonderful. And that's what Stephen King does. Everything comes down to, what does Tabitha think of it? I mean,
Yeah,
he wants to know her opinion. He says that, she is the person who reads everything first for him. And I love the fact that he had thrown away the manuscript for Carrie. Like, I love
yeah.
that. I think that's amazing. And she's like, why is this in the trash? So she pulls it out of the trash and she reads it and she's like, dude, this is good.
Yeah, just do a little work over here and do a little work over there. Tighten this up a little bit. Get those stinking adverbs out of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Adverbs.
If it ends with an ly, it's not in my book.
Right.
Generally,
No adverbs.
no adverbs. Stay away from adverbs. They're evil.
They are evil. We have to use good, strong verbs.
Yeah. Stay
Active
active.
verbs.
Stay off of passive.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I should be teaching this class.
You should.
Yeah.
I love that they get to hear from other authors. I think this is amazing. It's so important because I feel like we're at a point in the semester where I kind of reach a point where it's like, oh, she's just our teacher, like she's just, and so to hear from other authors, especially about midpoint
I know it.
semester, I think it's very good.
Yeah, a prophet is not honored in his own country.
Correct. And they get to know you after a while, and then all of a sudden your opinions don't matter quite as much. But I have finished quite a few. I have 3 novels that are published, but that one, it just bothers me. And I maybe one of these days, maybe.
Oh no, maybe about it. You'll get it out one of these days, about 2:30 in the morning. About the time I get a jingle in my head, it'll jingle in yours.
Right. And even her name, like the main character's name is Sylvia. And I'm like, why would I name someone Sylvia? Like, I don't even like that name, but that's her name. It's so bizarre. Like, there's absolutely everything about that story that I'm not comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's there. So anyway, I'm talking.
All right. We digress.
Yeah.
We digress.
Yeah. So with your writing, would you say that you have a particular method that you utilize every time that you sit down to write? Do you do the same kind of habit every time you sit down to write? Do you just write in the mornings, or is it always at 2:30 in the morning, or what seems to work?
Well, I like to write when I'm the sharpest. And I find that I'm sharpest earlier in the morning. So a lot of times if I'm working, I'm an old military guy, and I've been getting up at 4:30, 5 o'clock every morning for the last. I've been retired 31 years, and I still can't break the habit.
Right.
But I get up early in the morning, and I come into the office. I turn on the computer, fix my coffee, and then I say, okay, what's next? Mm-hmm. And it depends on what I'm working on. If I'm working on a book or something that I've outlined, then I like to go through the outline and make sure that it's right. I don't outline sentence by sentence. A lot of times I'll outline using bullet statements, and so that I can draw kind of a roadmap of where I want to go, and then bullet statement along the way. I never stay on path, but that is kind of my process, and then I just kind of write it out. Now, a lot of times, like a lot of authors, is I'll write the last part of the chapter before the first part of the chapter. So if I know where I'm going, then I get there, and then I figure out the path to get there. On the Apostle Murders, I just started on page 1 and never looked back, and just went. But it required a lot of research, because although I've been religious,
Mhm.
all my life, I don't know everything there is to know about church history.
Right.
So I had to do a lot of research on how the apostles and the original disciples died, and then work that into the story in modern day. And so that took some imagination. That took a lot of artistic license is what that took.
I'm really interested in reading that one because I have a Bible college background. I have a
Oh, do you?
bachelor's from a Bible
Oh,
college. And so I do have that kind of a background, but I love the idea of the character who has that hidden life.
yeah, yeah,
Very intrigued by that because a lot of times it's just following the motions and it's a secret life. And,
yeah.
you put on, your face,
Mhm.
but you're actually someone else. And
Yeah, and the follow-up book to it, which is called A Killer in Time,
mhm.
the same basic characters, except for the serial killer is Jack the Ripper.
Ah,
He's an re-embodiment. I shouldn't tell the story; nobody will buy it.
yeah.
But it is a doctor
Uh-huh.
who is embodied with the spirit of Jack the Ripper. So Jack the Ripper's doing the killing through somebody else, and
Right.
it's a pretty good story too.
Oh, I love that. Love that. Not who you think they are. I like those kind of
Yeah,
stories. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. We just read, have you read Night Shift by Stephen King, the short
Uh-uh.
story collection? He published it. It was one of his first collections of short stories, and he published it back in the 70s. And that's what we use in my Comp 1 class. We all of the students pick a short story, and they have to write their essays regarding whatever short story that they pick. And today we just dug into one called Strawberry Spring. And it's so great because it's on a college campus. It's during Strawberry Spring in New England, which is a fog that comes in. It's like a fake spring, and so this big fog settles just from the ocean, and it'll last for several days. And it's one of those fog situations where you can't see, and so there is a character who is highly affected by the fog, and he murders people during the fog, but
Yeah.
never when the fog isn't there. He's just a regular person. And so you don't know, as you're reading this story and as it's unfolding, you don't know that it's the narrator until you get to the end. And then you're like, oh, no. I love those kind of stories though, where it can be written in such a way that you don't know what's coming.
Yeah.
Love
Well, the
that.
thing about it, I would say to your students is get an idea that is realistic. Don't go off into some tangent of something
Yes.
that would just be impossible to justify. If you're going if you're going to write a murder thriller or a mystery, there's a difference between the two. I'm sure you know the differences. But if you're going to kill someone in your thriller, make sure that it's a way that somebody could actually die.
Yes.
You've seen these television shows where somebody walks up behind somebody and stabs them with a knife and they fall down dead.
Mhm.
That's not what happens.
Right.
Okay. You don't stab somebody with a knife and they fall down dead. There's all kinds of things that a person does long before they die when you stab them with a knife. Now, if you shoot somebody through the brain, they're going to fall down, okay? But
Right.
stabbing somebody with a knife, unless you stab them directly in the heart, they're not, and even then,
Mhm.
they're not going to be dead when they hit the ground. So there's just all kinds of, you've got to put some realism
Mhm.
into your fiction.
Yes, you absolutely do. And that's my problem with the NASCAR accident. It's brutal. It's just brutal. But life is
Yeah.
brutal. And so as writers, we want to make sure that our readers have a story to read that they're not going to forget.
Yeah, when I wrote From Victim to Hero, the young man in this book, after he escapes from the pedophile and he goes on to live a fairly normal life and becomes a child safety advocate. And then in the book, well, in real life, he had a traffic accident and was killed. He was on a motorcycle and a
Oh,
car pulled out in front of him. He hit the car and
wow.
was killed, but he wasn't killed instantly.
Mhm.
And so I wrote the scene of him dying from what I thought would be his point of view.
Right. Oh,
And I can't tell you how many times, how many emails and reviews I got, particularly emails from people who would say, you have no idea what this guy was thinking. And I would answer back, you're absolutely right. I have no idea how he was feeling. But as a writer, you have to put yourself into the place of your character, and you have to try to see what they're seeing and feel
yes.
what they're feeling. And sometimes you have to hear what they're hearing, and you got to get that all together and somehow take all of that mess
Yes.
and put it into words. And the words, again, have to stir an emotion.
Yes.
If they don't make you cry, if they don't make you laugh, if they don't make you do something, if you're reading something and you say, huh,
Mhm.
that sentence isn't written correctly. Everything that you read has to stir
Yes.
something inside of you. And
Yes.
if you're in a writing class and you're learning how to write, just make sure that your words stir an emotion. If they don't do anything else, if they tell a lie,
Right.
who cares? As
Right.
long as they stir an emotion.
We just did an assignment a couple of weeks ago where they had to, we've already been talking about developing characters, and we've talked about setting, and we've talked about conflict, but I had them take their characters that we had built already and then put them into a severe weather situation.
Oh.
And write out the severe weather situation, whether it has anything to do with the story or not. Can you write a scenario that's going to make someone who reads it go, and so can we then add this wild situation that no one can control and see what your characters do in it?
That's kind of like us Okies during a tornado watch.
Yeah.
Or a tornado warning, which is even worse.
Yeah.
And they sound the alarms. We don't go to the safe room.
That's right.
I've only been in the bathtub one time during a tornado, and that's when it was real, just up the block.
Right.
But we had a big tornado that came through here a while back, and they said it's coming from the west, it's heading east. We looked out, we could see the clouds. You know what my wife and I did? We went out on the front porch to watch it go over, and it sounded like a train going over. Okies don't run from tornadoes. Okies embrace tornadoes.
That's right. We sure do.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I'd written that down.
And those are the kind of experiences that those of us who live in Oklahoma, we may not realize, because that's somewhat normal to us. But people who don't live in our environment, I have a cousin who lives in California. He asked me one time, he's like, how can you live there? Isn't it scary because of the tornadoes? And I'm like,
and yet they've got ground that shakes houses down and knocks out people.
Exactly. I'm like, I would rather live in Oklahoma. But because your audience doesn't just live in Oklahoma, write about those experiences that you know and write them thoroughly.
Yeah. And scare the heck out of them.
That's right. And have fun doing it. But then, like the situation can sometimes be overwhelming for you, even as a writer, and you need a little bit of time to walk away from it before you can jump in. But it's that research, and then being authentic with what you write, as authentic as you possibly can, because like you said, it has to be emotional.
Yeah, it has to be emotional.
It absolutely has to be emotional for the reader then to experience some, I don't know, what is it that you want your reader to experience? Do you want them to learn a new idea, or do you want them just to experience something? Well, generally what we do as writers is we have some kind of a theme. We have some kind of an idea that we're pushing that we want them to walk away having to think about. So you have to keep that in mind as a writer.
Well, a book, should I call you Miss Cunningham or Dacia?
You can, well, it's Dacia.
Dacia.
Either way, it's fine.
I got that. A book does two things. A book either inspires,
yes,
or it instructs.
Yes.
Okay. So you can learn how to do something from a book.
Yes.
And the chances are it's dry. Okay. So you can learn how to do from a book because they instruct. But a book that inspires will make all the difference in the world on how you see things. A book can take you to places that you won't go physically.
That's right.
And yet, if it's well written, you know you've been there. And I got a I'm going to tell you a funny story. I got an email from a lady here not too long ago in regards to this book. Now, in my book, so I'll tell you the backstory. In my book, this is a Commonwealth of Planets, and we have our main planet is a planet called Shalimar. That's the name of the planet. And this is the headquarters planet for our whole Commonwealth. Well, I get an email here a while back from this lady on the East Coast. And she said, Mr. Laughter said, I was having a psychic reading recently. And the psychic said to me that you are not from this planet. She says, in truth, you are actually from a planet called Shalimar. Yeah. And so I was just wondering. She said, I went online and I Googled Shalimar and your book series and your name came up. And I was just wondering, can you tell me how to get home back to the planet Shalimar?
Oh, wow.
I wrote her back and I said, you know, the truth is, I said, the planet Shalimar is fictional and it's named after a bottle of perfume. So, but she was convinced that this psychic was trying to tell her that she was actually an extraterrestrial.
Oh, wow.
and that's just, I guess it's believable enough to know. I hope she ordered the book. I could use the money.
Oh, that's hilarious. I mean, yeah. Wow. Oh, I love that. It was named after a bottle of perfume. That's funny.
Yeah, there's a perfume. I don't know if it's even still in existence anymore because we wrote this book in '97. But there was a perfume named Shalimar. I don't remember what manufacturer makes it. And the fellow that I was writing with at the time, that was a perfume that his wife used.
Wow.
And we were talking on the phone one day, and I said, you know, we need to come up with the name for the planet that is our headquarters planet. And he picked up the bottle of perfume and said, how about Shalimar? I said,
That's
sounds
awesome.
good to me. So we wrote it down.
That's so cool. I love that. Yeah, just being creative, you know, just letting the ideas come and going for it. And then being able to accept the critique when you do go for the critique, and then making the changes that are necessary, and just letting the story become what it needs to be.
And make sure you've got your facts right.
Yes.
In my first edition of the Apostle Murders, I've got our detective. He's sitting in McDonald's eating lunch, and I've got him eating a Big Mac meal. Is that what they call it? A value meal or something like that? And he's sitting there eating this Big Mac meal and his onion rings. McDonald's doesn't serve onion rings.
Oh.
And I can't tell you how many emails I got letting me know that McDonald's doesn't serve onion rings. And then later in the book, I've got him drinking Jack Daniel's bourbon. Jack Daniel's doesn't make a bourbon; they make a whiskey.
Right.
And I got emails letting me know. Now this is a 70,000 word book, and one sentence that meet somebody.
Right. That's the thing they focus on, right? Yeah, absolutely. And that's what people are going to do. And you can't take that personally. You just fix it.
You got to go back and resubmit it.
Right.
Say, hey, publisher, we need to change this letter.
Right. Oh, that's funny. Okay, so we've already been chit-chatting for an hour.
I know we have. I just looked at my clock. Said, "Oh boy,
right.
She's gonna do overtime on this one."
Super fun. Could you just talk about the editing process quickly, and we'll let that be the last thing that we talk about. But
Yeah.
how, as far as editing goes, what do you like Stephen King, do you write your manuscript and then put it away for a certain amount of time? Or how is it that you go about that for yourself?
I am a notorious perfectionist.
Mhm.
And so I will generally write a section, a paragraphs or a chapter or whatever. And then I generally go back over it a time or two before I go to the next one, just to make sure I've got my directions right. Anytime I finish a manuscript, I go back through it 2 or 3 times just to make sure.
Right.
And I always do word check and take out all the adverbs. And there's words that I look for when I'm writing. I look for the word seem,
Mhm.
and I look for the word walk,
Uh-huh.
because there's nothing more boring than somebody walking somewhere.
Right.
If you tell me that you walk somewhere, I'm going to say, I don't care. I don't
Right.
care how you get there,
Mhm.
as long as you get there, but get there creatively. So there's words that I look for, but I definitely search for that. Um,
Wow.
but as far as the editing process is concerned, I want to make sure that my sentence structures are correct. I'm a real stickler about punctuation. I get in trouble with that on Facebook all the time, because I read Facebook and then I'll answer punctuation counts, really a stupid thing to do, but I do it anyhow. And
I'm a huge fan of Grammarly Premium.
so
I preach Grammarly Premium all the time.
and I'm gonna tell you, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much you edit, and it doesn't matter who edits for you. Once that book comes out,
Yes.
you go back and read it, you are going to find mistakes.
Yes.
And so uh,
Yes.
go through it sentence by sentence.
Mhm.
But you don't want, when you're editing, you don't want to just go through it and read sentence to sentence. You want to make sure that your sentence here um, flows
Yes.
into the sentence down here. I'm trying to think of what that term is. A transitive verb. Okay, is that correct? A transitive verb is a verb, or a verb that you use that the first element coincides with the second element. The second element coincides with the third element, but the transitive verb is when the first element coincides with the third element. Does that make sense? And
Yes.
so you want to make sure that when you're writing that paragraph or whatever, that as it flows, and because it flows, then it flows from step to step to step, and the first step has to be in step with the third step. I hope that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. And so that's what I watch for when I'm in the editing process. And then when you send it off to the publisher, then they also go through the editing process as well, and they'll let you know. Now, my publisher went out of business,
Mhm.
and he had an imprint in his business called Axia Books that he published my sci-fi under. Then he had another imprint that he did my thriller series, and another imprint that he did the other stuff under. And when he went out of business, I took ownership of the Axia
Mhm.
imprint, and now all of my books in Kindle form are published under Axia, and I own it.
Okay.
And so I actually self-publish now, as
Uh-huh.
opposed, but I did just send off 3 books to a regular publisher who has expressed uh, interest. I had a publisher here a while back that expressed interest in my sci-fi series, and I said, well, right now I've got 7 books published, and they said, well, we'll take all of them. And
Oh.
I said, well, okay. I said, what will be the process? And they said, well, the first book will come out in about 18 months, or no, 2 years. It'll come out in 2 years. And then we'll follow with another book every 18 months. And I said, I'm 69 years old. Okay, so the chances of me being around to publish a 16-book series, each one taking 18 months to get out, is
Right.
not going to work for me.
Right.
Okay. And so I did not go with that publisher, but I did just send off 3 books to a publisher that but they're standalone books.
Right. Right.
So if he goes with those, then he can do all three of those, hopefully over a year or 2 year period.
Right.
But
Yeah, that's another
my,
thing too, is you've got to do some research on the publishing companies that you're going to apply for. Don't just like, put yourself out there for all of them and every one of them. You need to make sure that you're doing research so that you end up with someone who's actually going to be helpful to you.
And some of the things that you want to stay away from, and I know this is maybe a little bit off track since we're talking about publishing, editing, now we're talking about publishing. But a couple of things that you want to really watch out for is don't get mixed up with the vanity press.
Yes.
I just had an author contact me here recently who was with a previous company that has gone out of business, and so she wanted to submit to a new company who said, yeah, we'll publish your book if you've got $3,400.
Right.
Then we'll and you know what they always say, it's like that advertisement on television says, if you'll send us your book, we'll get it into every bookstore. We'll make it, they say we'll make it available.
Right.
All the booksellers. They don't tell you we're going to get it into the bookstore. They say we're going to make it available. Well, if you self-publish, it's available to all of the bookstores. Okay.
Right.
You don't need a vanity press to do it.
You do not need to be putting out all of that money.
Never pay anyone to publish your work. If it's good enough to publish, it's good enough for you to get paid for it.
That's right.
Okay, so watch for vanity press. Don't pay anybody that. If you do go with a regular publisher, make sure that your contract is clear on how you're going to get paid.
Right.
Don't give anybody exclusive rights to publish your work for 10 years.
Well, and with that too, because my experience was, because my publisher went out of business as well. Make sure that you have access to your manuscripts upon.
Make sure you retain all of your words.
Yes.
Now, the jacket cover, when a publisher publishes your book and they design the jacket cover, that's theirs. But you can republish you can even republish under the same title, as long as you don't steal somebody's artwork. I have all the artwork from all of my books from my previous publisher because he went out of business and he just gave it to all of his authors.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That is wonderful. I've had to, this last year, I republished, or I had republished A Kiss in the Rain, and I came up with a new cover. For it because I, don't have the access to the other cover, which is fine. I think I like better what the newer one is. So yeah, I like it a lot better. And it actually is a picture that I decided to use that a former student drew for me. And and
there's advantages and disadvantages being traditionally published and being self-published. Self-publishing, you are it.
Yes.
If it doesn't sell, it's not the book's fault, it's yours.
Yes. Oh my goodness, I have one manuscript that is called For Love of Words, and it was published through my publishing company. And after they went out of business, I thought, well, you know what? I want to go through it again. I want to make some changes. And so I have a cousin who is very perceptive. Let's just say that she's very perceptive, and she's quite a bit younger than me. So she's in the millennium generation. Well, I had her read through the manuscript, and I was like, I would love to get your feedback. Just give me some, some ideas. She came back with 10 pages, single spaced, front and back.
Oh gosh.
And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's already been published. But I thought, you know what, Dacia, if you want to have a wider audience and you want to be reaching a younger generation, it probably will be a good idea to take her insight and to consider some potential changes to the story. So that's something that I'm tossing around right now, because it just depends on who you have read your manuscript on the advice that you're going to get. And so you need to make your mind up. Who is my audience? Who am I trying to reach? Like many of your books are a young adult.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to know who your audience is and be able to write something that they're going to be moved by.
And I have found that in the young adult series, a lot of my readership are mothers.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue, but a lot of the emails and reviews that I have received are actually from mothers saying I would let my children read this book.
Oh, that's wonderful. That is wonderful.
Yeah.
Huh, that's interesting. I like that. Maybe
And
they
I've got others people say I don't want my kids to read this. So, not that I don't use profanities. I don't,
right,
you know.
right.
And
I really don't either. I really don't either. I refuse to let there be a lot of profanity in my work because there's always a better way to word something.
My daddy always told me, he said, son, he says, profanity is nothing but oral ignorance.
Yes.
That you can always find a better way to say it.
Yes.
I started out, right. Yeah, I started out this book, Killer in Time. The first word in this book, let me see if it's in this one. Yeah, the first word in this book is the B word. And when I sent it off to a beta reader who is a best-selling New York Times author or New York Times best-selling author, how do you say that? In any case, he when he got hold of me, he said, Jim, he says, take that first word out of your book. It's not necessary. And I didn't do it. I didn't follow his advice. And I cannot tell you how many people said I couldn't finish your book because of the first word. Yeah. And, wow. and people who said I wouldn't even read your book. I would, not that I couldn't finish your book. I didn't read your book because of the first word.
Wow.
And so when I went to ebook, I took that first word out, and now it sells. I get paid for it every month.
Right. Wow.
And I don't know if that word made a difference or not, but the word did not make that much of an impact on the sentence. And so when you're writing it, make sure that the words that you use for emphasis actually adds to the body of your work. Otherwise, just leave it out. It's not necessary.
It's so average to rely on profanity.
Oh, I know it. I know it.
It's average. And I don't want any of my writing to be average. I do want to use a better vocabulary always.
Yeah. And people use profanities without thinking about it. And they don't think about what impact it will have on not just the structure of their page, but what it'll have on the psyche of the person who's reading the book.
Right.
Because if you write like a word like that word sticks in, it sticks.
You know? It absolutely does. That's something I was talking to my class this morning about. Was we just read Strawberry Spring by Stephen King. We read the short story on Monday, and then we watched a college student video recreation of the short story today. And what was so interesting is in the video that these people created, you know, trying to make a movie of the short story, it's just cuss, 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 cuss.
I hate that.
But then when you read the actual story itself, Stephen King didn't do that.
Yeah.
He always has a better way to write.
There's always a better way to say it. There's always a better way to say something.
And so we had a conversation about that being, why do you suppose that the producer felt it was necessary to add the profanity? You know, and the students were kind of like, whoa, that is different. It was better the way Stephen King did it. And I'm like,
I think they do it for ratings so that they can get a higher, what is it?
Value?
Shock. So they can get a higher shock value. Yeah. And get up into the R ratings and other ratings as opposed to I don't even know what the ratings are anymore. I don't look at enough of it to tell you what the ratings are.
I feel like that's something that someone who doesn't truly care about writing or have the passion for writing tends to think that that's a way out, or that's a thing that's going to get more ratings. Whereas if you're someone who loves writing because you're passionate about telling a story, it's not a thing of value to use profanity. You're actually writing something that's going to be impactful and mean something, and you don't need to resort to cursing or everyday language. And I love that you pointed out even using words like walk or seem.
Yeah.
We have to be more clever.
Another word that I take out of my manuscripts is the word that.
Mm-hmm.
I hate the word that, you know.
Yeah.
And so, because there's so many other ways that you can say something.
Yes.
Other than that.
Yes, absolutely. And those aren't necessarily things you're going to find on your first edit.
No, they're not.
Mm-mm. And it might take somebody else to help you locate those words as well. But we have to be willing as writers if we want our stories to make an impact.
Yeah. And when you're having somebody else read your manuscript, and like if you're going to use a beta reader,
Mm-hmm.
you need to tell your beta reader what they need to be looking for.
Yes.
And it's because they need to know what you want in your book, but they also want to be able to see from, remember, a beta reader is looking at your work from your point of view.
Yes.
And if they can't see what you want them to see, then they're not going to find what you want them to find.
Right. Oh, it's good stuff. I'm so excited.
You know, you're gonna need 2 hours to teach this class.
I know.
If we keep going, we've been on here for an hour and 20 minutes, and you got a 50-minute class.
I know. Well, we're gonna have to draw this to a close, but I do want to say this. You guys, Jim is. Are you the current president or the former president of?
I am the former president. I served as president for 2 years, and then I turned it over to Joshua Danker Dake, and then he turned it over to Rex Griffin, which I believe you're going to have on
Both of
later
them.
on. And you know what you ought to do is you ought to plan. You ought to come out to our on October the 22nd. We are going to be having a free writers conference here in Tulsa, and it's going to be south of town, south of Glenpool, at the Triumph Worship Center. That's just a venue that we use.
Okay.
And we will have some of the best authors in the area.
Nice.
Will be there teaching you. Now, I say this every year. We will have authors there that will teach you how to write.
Yes.
But we will have nobody there that can teach you why you need to write. Okay, so that's something that's got to come from you. But October 22nd, put that on your calendar, and we'll make sure that we get you the information.
I am.
And I'll get hold of Connie and have her make sure. And then then come to it. It doesn't cost anything. It's an all-day thing. We start at like 9 o'clock in the morning, go to 4.
It's awesome.
We'll have different sessions set up, and we're looking for a keynote speaker. Come to think of it, who could we get?
I'm excited. So the Tulsa Night Writers, you guys, I've been telling you that you need to find writing groups, whether you formulate that from your classmates or you join a group like Tulsa Night Writers. You need to, and I'm saying this, I need to be doing this myself. I was involved in one in St. Louis, and it was amazing. It was such an incredible experience, and I made relationships with people that I will always have. So you want to be a writer, you need to be communicating and around other writers, because we
find you an accountability partner that you can bounce ideas off of. Find you somebody that will tell you the truth. Don't find somebody that will tickle your ears, because it doesn't do any good.
That's right.
We in the Night Riders, we have an accountability program. I started that under my presidency. Started the writers conference under my presidency. But find you a local group, whether it's with us or somebody else. Critique groups are good if you're in an honest critique group that's not brutal. You don't want to get a critique group that'll tell you how stupid you really are. You want to get in a critique group where you can bounce ideas off and that will help you improve, because I don't care who you are, you need improvement.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's another thing I like to point out with the students, especially in my Comp 1 class, because we use Stephen King. There is the story, The Man Who Loved Flowers. There is a spot in that story that is nails on chalkboard to me that needs fixed and edited. But that thing was published in like 1976. So it's not going to be changed.
No.
But he says her eyes, he loved to see her eyes light up with surprise when he brought her a surprise. I'm like, Stephen, seriously?
That's a little redundant.
A little redundant. He loved to see her eyes light up with surprise and joy whenever he brought her a surprise.
Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a note to myself. And as soon as I get to be the writer that he is and start making as much money as he does, I'm going to write that sucker a letter. Tell him he needs to go back and rewrite that sentence.
That's right.
But right now, I don't think he'd listen to me. I don't.
My students last semester, they were like, they dared me to post it on Twitter that I would correct that sentence. And so I did, but they were all like, ooh, what if he writes you back? And I'm like, I hope he does. It was super funny, but I mean, I didn't push it out there or anything. I just kind of did it. I didn't really hashtag it a whole lot because it is a little intimidating, but it was super funny. Well, Jim, we're going to wrap this up.
Well, I hope this has been informative.
Absolutely.
Do want to tell you students, just a personal plug. Yes. I do book reviews every week. Right now I'm working on John Maxwell's book, The Developing the Leader Within You. You can find me on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube/Jim Laughter. You'll find me. And I do book reviews on personal growth.
Yes.
And so these are some things that might help you. I did Al Schrader's book, The 4 Color Personalities, and to help you identify different personalities of people that can help you with your writing. But if you have a mind to, now the lessons are an hour long.
Once I get the video that we have just done, once I get it ready to publish for them on Blackboard and on YouTube, I will also put some links to your sites. But do you want me to put your website on there or not?
Well, that website is actually redundant. I didn't know it was still up.
Okay. Okay. Well,
I'm working on trying to do another one.
I'll put a link to your author page on YouTube and a link to your YouTube page, both.
That'd be great. Yeah.
So the students have access to that.
Sure.
Okay. And if it's all right with you, I will post it on YouTube as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'd love to. You know what? There's one person I love to hear talk, and that's me.
I understand that completely. That's one of the reasons why I'm a teacher. I get to go in and I can just talk and talk and talk.
We could chat all day.
Yeah, we literally could. So we're gonna stop. But
pull the cart.
I look forward to talking to you again. I do have every intention of filling out my application for Tulsa Night Riders and coming to see you all because that is something that I need.
I'm making a note right now. Conference info to Dacia.
Yes.
Okay. I'll get Connie to send that to you.
Perfect. Thank
once
you
it's all set.
Very much. I very much appreciate you taking some time out today to talk with the students and with me.
It's been a pleasure.
And so hopefully, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.